please do so. Our hashtag is GDForumEU. GDForumEU. So please share with us your thoughts. And on this, I'm now going to open the floor for questions. If anybody has any question that you would like to ask.
Yes.
Please introduce yourselves and just a couple of words about who you are and where you come from for the benefit of the speakers.
Dean Carroll from publicserviceeurope.com. Just a question for Jackie Miner. You mentioned that traditional notions of national sovereignty would need to be reconsidered. Could you expand upon that and give us a bit more detail?
I think it was also reflected in the speech made by the former Prime Minister. Traditionally, diplomacy has been seen as one aspect of national sovereignty of the nation state. The reality is that certainly for the smaller member states, but also for the bigger ones, I think, it's not necessarily the most effective way to pursue foreign and security policy by acting individually in an increasingly complex and globalized world. So, to take a very simple example, consular services, they are seen as a manifestation of nationality, of national sovereignty. It is the relationship which a state bears with its citizens. But in reality, it's very difficult for those services to be delivered in every country in the world. And some sharing of responsibility would be effective. And that's a very simple example. I think also there is the question, which was raised by the Prime Minister, as to whether better coordination and better agreement, upstream agreement on the objectives of European foreign and security policy would not enhance its effectiveness in the world and certainly enable the External Action Service to function more effectively.
Yes, I have to say that it has always been much easier for representatives from smaller countries to call for stronger EU foreign and security policy and more even integration, but in every case more cooperation. So in that sense I of course notice that there are some differences what comes to the opinions between different countries, but I think that all the countries really have noticed the different with the past, that these global challenges they are very seldom to be tackled by one single country.
Thank you very much. We're going to have plenty of time for discussion. I'm told that we are now going to have a little word from Mr. Van Rompuy about this particular conference. And then we'll start the next session.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to say a few words.
You can see that he's very keen.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to say a few words on the occasion of this annual conference of the Global Diplomatic Forum. The impact of the economic and financial situation in Europe figures prominently on your program. It is normal. To punch our full weight on the global stage, our first priority is to overcome the difficulties our economies face at home. All of them. Influence on world affairs depends more on economic weight than on military power. Questions like, how can we use trade to boost growth? How can we speed up the recovery of the world economy? How can we reform the global financial system? These have become central themes in meetings with partner countries, be it in China, India, or the United States. Every foreign relations expert has to be a top economist these days. But it doesn't stop there, far from it. From Mali to Lima, from Kosovo to Korea, European countries are still very much engaged on international issues. They do so more and more as a club. After all, their diplomacies have been working together for over 40 years, so it's normal that by now cooperation has become something of a reflex that common diplomatic service can work on. Of course, Europeans don't agree all the time on every issue, but the fact is that today, even on difficult issues like Iran and on interventions in Libya and Mali, our 27 countries very easily find shared positions, often within hours. And together they also run 15 European crisis missions on 3 continents. We are the biggest development aid donor in the world, the biggest contributor on climate change. The Union is playing its role as a global actor. The EU is, by the way, a member of the G20 and G8. The European Council regularly discusses foreign policy issues. We remain very active in our neighborhood, and in that respect, the High Representative recently brokered an historic agreement between Belgrade and Pristina. The financial and economic crisis, challenging as it may be, does not stop that. If anything, it's forcing us to reconsider even more carefully how we do things, how we can work more closely together, to stay engaged on the global issues that matter most to our countries and our citizens. For instance, on security and defense, an issue you'll be discussing later today. Cuts in defense spending are not new, but with the crisis, they've accelerated and become even more uncoordinated. As individual countries, as a family of countries, we can't afford security gaps. So if we must do better with less, then we need to work closer together. What is at stake is the ability of Europeans to ensure their security, to defend the values we stand for in the world. Here, we also have a special responsibility for our neighborhoods. And our common security strategy says it well. Even in an era of globalization, geography is still important. It's essential to discuss this strategically among European leaders. And that's why I arranged for a dedicated meeting of the European Council on Defense in December. I encourage you to feed the results of your reflections today in the collective thinking currently taking place between all countries on these questions. And I wish you a fruitful conference. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to say a few words on the
Thank you very much. Well, I think we should start the contribution. May I invite you now to join me in expressing our gratitude to our 2 morning speakers. Before I invite Sophie Long to take the chair for the rest of the morning. Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen, and I promised you will have plenty of time for discussion and questions and answers. Thank you very much, and please, Sophie.
I normally chair discussions at the BBC on the BBC News channel, but I'm very pleased to be part of the team here to welcome you to Europe House this morning. It is a well-known fact, of course, that not all Europeans are wild about the European Union. But in the last 24 hours, a recent poll has suggested that confidence in the organisation is now flagging faster and further than it has been ever before. Now, that gloomy view, perhaps understandable given the current economic crisis, but what will the impact of this deepening disillusionment be? And will Europe's unity be the long-term casualty of its current economic crisis? Well, despite the British Prime Minister David Cameron's warnings to his MPs about the dangers of banging on about Europe, it seems Conservative MPs here have been doing little else. This week, we in the media, of course, have dutifully followed suit, and we're going to carry on that theme throughout the course of the morning. We're running a little bit tight for time, so we're a little bit over schedule at the moment. There will be plenty of time for your questions, so do keep them in mind. During the first of our sessions this morning, we're going to be focusing on discussing whether the EU common foreign and security policy can put the U back into the EU. And joining me on the panel to bang on about this with me is Gideon Rackman, who is Chief Foreign Affairs Columnist at the Financial Times, Mark Hendrick, Member of Parliament here in the UK, and also a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, and David Campbell-Bannerman, who is now Conservative,
Yes, sir.
have been UKIP.
I've been UKIP.
So an interesting
Deputy
time
leader.
for you, Deputy Leader, and MEP with us as well. And I think the way we'll do things in this current session, we'll hear our panellists make their points first, then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion, and then I'd like to open it out to the floor, if that's okay with you. And we'll start with Mark Henry. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Sophie. I have a sore throat at the moment, so apologies if my voice sounds a little bit weak. The 2008 global crisis hit European economies particularly hard, limiting the political capital and economic resources available for wider EU foreign policy ambitions, and it suggested to the world that Europe was a declining global force compared to the rising non-Western powers, which were less severely affected by the crisis. The Brok report, and Elmar Brok is the chairman, I think, of the European Parliamentary Foreign Affairs Committee, noted that the ongoing financial and sovereign debt crisis is deeply affecting the credibility of the European Union in the international arena and undermining the effectiveness and long-term sustainability of the common foreign and security policy. I think that the outcome